about plants. Is that right? Okay. And in science, you've been learning about animals and habitats. So when we're reading science books, there's a certain type of writing that I find very helpful. I know Mrs. Kirchhoff read From Seed to Plant by Gail Gibbons to you, and I see it right up here. Well, Gail Gibbons did something in her writing that really helped me to get her message, and I want to share that with you today. I'm going to read just a short part of the book, and I want you to pay attention to how the diagram helps me get Gail Gibbons' message. Most plants make seed. A seed contains the beginning of a new plant. Seeds are different shapes, sizes, and colors. All seeds grow into the same kind of plant that made them. Many plants grow into flowers. Flowers are where seeds begin. A flower is made up of many parts. Now, this is the part where Gail Gibbons really helped me to get her message, because when she said a flower is made up of many parts, she included a labeled diagram that shows the parts. There's the pistil, and she explains that that's at the center of the flower. And then she says the sticky part on top of the pistil is called the stigma. Down here, she says that at the bottom of the pistil are tiny eggs called ovules. So all of these parts she's labeled in this diagram. This is the same diagram, but a little simplified. It doesn't have the explanations. And let me show you how Gail Gibbons helped me with this. It says, before a seed can begin to grow, a grain of pollen, I think, what's pollen? I can look right up at the diagram and I can see pollen. Oh yeah, I remember. The pollen are the little granules. A grain of pollen from the stamen. Oh, my mind goes, what's a stamen? And I can look up and I see the stamen. Must land on the stigma. There's another science word. Here's the stigma. So Gail Gibbons uses this diagram to connect with her sentences so I can really understand her message. I really like that Gail Gibbons does that in her writing, because it helps me as a good reader to figure out what she's saying and figure out those words. Over here, I've listed the things that Gail Gibbons did in her diagram. She used scientific names, and when I look at the diagram, I see words like stigma, stamen, and pistil. Those are good science words that I need to know. She also used a connecting line. So from the word to the part of the picture, so I know exactly what part she's talking about. She used a simple illustration. You know, she could have put 16 flowers and bees and birds and grass in that picture, but that would make it hard for me, her reader, to see those different parts. So she just put what was essential in there, just the most important parts. And then she connected to the sentences. So when I read these sentences, those words are in the diagram and in the sentences. So I can move back and forth as a reader and really get her message. Gail Gibbons does a really good job of using label diagrams to help me get her message about flowers. Here's what I want you to do now. Back at your desks are some books, and in those books are some labeled diagrams. Now, you can look at a book by yourself, or you can look at a book with your friend, but what I want you to do is find a labeled diagram that has scientific names, a connecting line to the part of the diagram so we know exactly what that is telling us. A good illustration that's simple, and that if I read the sentences on the page, I find those words right there. Just like when I read these sentences, I could find the important words right here in the diagram. So head on back to your desk.
North America, that's where connecting line, check. Simple illustration.
Let's see. I would check and see if the words and the diagram go together. Do you know what? Let's see who the author is here. That's Gail Gibbons too. Another thing Gail does is she just labels things. That's not the diagram that I'm looking for in that book. I bet if you look at some other pages, you'll find a label diagram. I'm going to leave the sticky notes in them so that you can go back and remind yourself of what those good diagrams look like. When I come back on Friday, we're going to talk a little bit more about how a labeled diagram helps a reader. But this time, instead of being the reader, you're going to be the writer on Friday.
I have right here.
Thank you. Good morning. Kelly's going to help me out with some coaching questions about the lesson that I did on the Reading Talk Aloud.
Okay, the first question I have for you is, what do you think went well in your lesson?
I think that the pacing was good. It moved along at a good clip. The talk aloud part was crisp and was focused on something very specific. I also liked using the attribute chart because then I could refer back to it, and I'll use it again today in the writing talk aloud. And I think that the student application was good in general. They were able to get right to it and be successful with the task.
I agree. What went less well?
One thing that I forgot to do was one of the steps. I didn't read the text uninterrupted before I started talking about it. So that was just an error, and there were some consequences from that in the flow of the lesson. Another thing was some kids had trouble with scientific word from my attribute chart, and so I would want to use a different descriptor there, I think. And then the other thing that I went less well was wrapping up that student application. It was just kind of clunky. I wasn't satisfied with it.
Okay, with that being said, how would you improve the lesson?
One thing I would do, I don't think I would need my whole scripted lesson plan, but if I had the steps on a card, then I would remember to do each step, and I wouldn't miss that one that I missed reading it uninterrupted. Another thing I would do is fix the attribute chart. I would choose a better word than scientific, maybe clear, concise label. And then finally, I would think through my student application to a conclusion. I had an idea of how to start, and it went well, and then I thought, okay, how am I gonna wrap this up? So I didn't think that well through enough, so I would fix that.
Thank you for your report.
Thank you for your help.